Lighting techniques for filmmakers and photographers. This lighting course is going to cover a lot of ground. We will start with beginner techniques but quickly advance. We will cover the following topics: 3-point lighting, white balancing, understanding color temperature, mixing light colors, lighting patterns, including split, Rembrandt, loop, butterfly, broad, and short lighting. We will also discuss high key versus low key lighting, soft light versus hard light, how to create soft light, bouncing light, using negative fill, using a softbox, how to use RGB lights, creating a book light with Pro Gear, creating a low-budget do-it-yourself book light, Cove Lighting, using a space light with multiple setups including dramatic overhead lighting, and finally, choosing the right bulbs to use in practical lamps. Each thing that we teach you builds off of the previous lesson shown. Try to watch this entire video all at once, or at least subscribe to this channel and come back to it when you have more time. I highly suggest trying these techniques out for yourself. Practice makes perfect. Let's get started. 3-point lighting. 3-point lighting consists of 3 lights, placed in a triangular pattern. Point 1. The key light. This is the light that we will expose our camera to. It's placed to the side of our camera. Point 2. The fill light. This light is on the opposite side of our key light. It's usually not as bright as our key light. Its job is to fill in the shadow side of our subject's face. Point 3. The backlight. This light is placed behind our subject. It helps separate the subject from the background. Our subject is in the middle of the triangle, and our camera is placed between the key and fill lights. Now let's see how 3-point lighting looks in reality. We're going to use 3 inexpensive LED lights for this demonstration. To make the light sources softer and more flattering on our subject, we will also use light modifiers, 2 collapsible softboxes, and a sheet of white diffusion. First, let's talk about the key light. It is an LED light on a light stand. I'll place one of the softboxes on it to make it a softer light. This will be our brightest light. Here's what the key light looks like on our subject. Next, let's talk about our fill light. It's actually the same kind of LED light that our key light is, and I've placed the same softbox on it. When I turn it on, however, I will dim it so that it's not as bright as the key light. Here's just the fill light on. It fills in the shadow side of our subject's face, the side of our subject's face that the key light did not illuminate. Next, let's talk about the backlight. It's another LED light. It's placed on a boom arm on a light stand so that it can be aimed behind the subject, yet still be out of camera frame. To soften it a bit, I clipped a sheet of white diffusion around it using clothespins. If we look at the backlight turned on, you can see how it hits the shoulders and top of the subject's head. This light is dimmed quite a bit. A bald head doesn't need a lot of light. Someone with dark hair would require more light, and we'd have to make it less dim. Now let's turn on all 3 lights at the same time. That's the basic 3-point lighting setup. I think it looks pretty good. Let's go a little deeper. Let's add 2 more lights to our shot. We will turn on the consumer lamp that we can see in the background of our shot. This lamp will be known as a practical light. A practical light is a working light that we can see in our shot. It helps light up our background. I often use a dimmer on this type of light to control its brightness. It's often too bright. This practical light also adds realism to our shot by showing the audience a light source that we can see in the shot. Let's add another light to our shot. We will call this light a background light because it will light up the bookshelf. It's an LED light bar. Let's take a look at the shot now with all of our lights on. In my opinion, it looks even better. Of course, it's up to you how bright you want to make each light. Less contrast between the light sources will create a lighter mood. More contrast and more shadows will create a more dramatic mood. Color temperature and white balance. What is color temperature? Basically, different light sources have different color temperatures. Color temperature is measured in Kelvin. The lower the Kelvin number, the warmer the color of the light is. The higher the color temperature, the cooler the light source is. Professional production lights usually come in two different flavors. One is 3200 degrees Kelvin, known as tungsten balanced lights. The other popular color temperature is 5600 degrees Kelvin, known as daylight balanced lights. Some LED light sources can be switched from tungsten or daylight balanced, or can even be adjusted to a color temperature in between. All of the lights in our scene are currently at or set to daylight 5600 degrees Kelvin. Therefore, we must let our camera know that we are using all daylight balanced lights by going to its white balance setting and switching it to 5600 degrees. It's usually represented by a sun icon. Now the color in our shot looks right. I did this before I shot our 3-point lighting video, always white balance before shooting. If our lights were all tungsten balanced, we would set our camera to that setting as shown. The icon is usually a light bulb. If you have lights that you are not sure of their color temperature or accuracy, you can use a white card and perform a manual white balance. Check your camera manual on how to do this. It's usually as simple as turning all of your lights on, putting a white card in the shot, and pressing the Update White Balance button. This will make the colors in your scene accurate. Mixing color temperatures. It's a creative choice if you want all of your lights in your scene the same color temperature, or if you want to mix color temperatures. Let's look at the color temperature possibilities of the lights in our shot. Our key light and our fill lights are daylight balanced only lights. If we wanted to change them to tungsten, we would have to put half CTO color temperature orange gels on them. This turns them from daylight to tungsten. If these were tungsten lights and we wanted to turn them daylight, we could put blue gels on them. Our backlight is variable. It can be changed to tungsten or daylight or something in between. Our practical lamp has a daylight balanced bulb in it, but we could easily switch it out to a tungsten balanced bulb. Our background light illuminating the bookshelf is variable. It can be changed to tungsten or daylight or something in between. Now that all of our lights have been changed to tungsten, we must white balance our camera. I'll change the setting from daylight to tungsten. Notice how that fixes the color in our shot. Remember, like I said, it's also okay to mix color temperatures in a shot if that's what you're looking for. Let's remove the orange gels from the key and fill lights to make them daylight balanced again, but leave the backlight, background light, and practical light all at tungsten. Now when we switch our white balance on our camera back to daylight, our subject's skin tone looks natural because he's being lit by daylight balanced lights. However, the background light, practical lamp light, and backlight are all very warm because they are set at tungsten. It's just another option for you to consider. First, I set up a black backdrop in the background of our shot so that you can really focus on the light on our subject. Our first lighting pattern is called split lighting. Split lighting is simply lighting half of your subject's face. It creates a very dramatic look. Split lighting adds mystery to a shot. Simply place your light 90 degrees to the left or right of your subject. You can leave the unlit side of the face in complete shadow, or you can bounce some fill light into it using a white card or a second light that's not as bright, depending on the mood you want to create. Loop lighting is our next pattern. Loop lighting is made by lighting the subject from about 45 degrees in front and above them. This creates a nose shadow that loops down at an angle onto their cheek. You can also use a fill light if desired on the shadow side of their face, although most of their face will already be lit. Our next pattern is Rembrandt lighting. For Rembrandt lighting, place your light source higher than the subject's head, to the left or right side of them, and aim it down at their face. Keep adjusting the position of the light or the position of the subject until you see a small triangular lit shape on the shadow side of the subject's face on their cheek. I also like to make sure that some of their eye is lit too. The shadow is created by the nose, so it may take a little adjusting to get this pattern right, as everyone's nose is different. This pattern was used in paintings by famous Dutch artist Rembrandt. It creates a classic look. You can use fill light if desired. Our next pattern is butterfly lighting. Butterfly lighting is achieved by placing the light source above the camera. It creates a butterfly-shaped shadow under the subject's nose. It creates a glamorous look. You can place a bounce card under the subject's chin, out of frame, if desired to reduce shadows. Broad lighting. Broad lighting is where the subject is lit from the front side of their face that is closest to the camera. It often makes a subject's face look wider or broader, less of the face is in shadow. The opposite of broad lighting is short lighting. Short lighting is where the subject is lit from the side of their face that is farthest from the camera. It creates a slimming effect because more of the face is in shadow. I particularly like this pattern. I feel like putting the shadow side of the face closer to the camera is more dramatic. Use fill light if desired to reduce contrast. While we are at it, let's get a few definitions out of the way and show you an example of each. They are high key lighting and low key lighting. High key lighting refers to a scene that is more evenly lit. It's a low contrast setup. You'll sometimes see this look used in comedies. Low key lighting is the opposite of high key lighting. It refers to a dark scene with high contrast and dark shadows. You may want a look that is in between these two. The creative choice is yours. What's the difference between hard and soft light, and how do you create each type? I'll show you using a cell phone, a piece of paper, and one of my son's toys. We will use the toy as our subject. The light on my cell phone will be our light source. The key to creating hard light, or light that casts hard shadows, is having a small light source compared to your subject. My cell phone's light is small compared to the size of the toy, therefore the light causes hard shadows. Now watch what happens when we take the same source of light, my cell phone, and aim that light at a sheet of paper. The paper is much larger than the toy, so when I bounce the light off of it, we get much softer light and softer shadows. This is because the paper has become the new light source, and it's much bigger than the cell phone light alone. So, small light sources cast hard shadows. Large light sources cast softer shadows. It's important to note that soft light is not better than hard light, but to a photographer or cinematographer, it's a choice. We often use soft light when shooting people because it's flattering. We make light softer by bouncing it off of a surface or by shooting it through a diffusion material. Sometimes we even do both. Here you see a light without any diffusion. It's a small light source and therefore causes strong shadows. Look at the snowman's nose. Here's the same light with some diffusion on it. The shadows are softer because the light source is bigger. Diffusion makes the light source bigger and shadows softer. In case you didn't know, muslin is a natural cotton fabric. We are using the unbleached type. We are going to explore bouncing light off of it and shooting light through it. We will also compare how it looks versus a traditional softbox. First, let's take a look at the shot without any lighting gear. As you can see, the existing lighting is not very flattering. The first thing I'm going to do is close the blinds in the room to block out any incoming sunlight. We want full control over the lighting in this room. Let's set up the muslin now. I'm using 2 light stands and some clamps. I'll raise the 2 light stands and clamp the muslin across them. Next, I'll set up my daylight balanced Godox VL300 LED light. I like this light because it's quite bright, dimmable, and has excellent light quality. No noticeable green tint. Let's see how the bounced light off of the muslin looks on the skin. In my opinion, it looks pretty good. Bouncing the light into the muslin has created a large, warm, soft light. I'm not loving that the doorway is dark. I'll put a Godox VL150 in the hall. To warm it up, I'll add an orange gel. To break up the light a little, I'll put a tree branch in front of it. It adds some shadowy texture to the wall in the background. I like that look a little better. Next, let's set up a black reflector and place it next to where our subject is sitting, on the opposite side of where the muslin is placed. This acts as a negative fill and creates deeper shadows on the side of the face. It adds a little more drama to the shot, if that's what you're going for. Now let's see what happens when we shoot light through the muslin instead of bouncing light off of it. This also creates a nice diffused look. Let's try another scenario. This time we will bounce light off of the white side of our reflector and then it will travel through the muslin and onto our subject. This creates very soft light. Our shadows are super soft. The only negative side to this approach is that it eats up a lot of the light's power. Having a bright light is very helpful. Finally, let's remove the muslin altogether and use a traditional softbox. This softbox bounces light into a silver umbrella, and then the light travels through white diffusion material. To keep this light more directional, I've attached a honeycomb grid. This keeps the light from spilling all over the background of our shot. I've also placed the white side of the reflector near the chair as a fill light. Because this light is not as warm as the bounced muslin light, I'll take the orange gel off of our background light so the color temperature of all the lights match. Because the softbox is not spilling light everywhere, the shot is a little more dramatic in my opinion. The light coming from the bounced muslin was harder to control. This is not a bad thing, it's just different. Another look, another option. Finally, I'm going to go for a very contrasty look. Instead of using the white reflector as the fill, I'm going to use the black side to deepen our shadows. This is negative fill. I'm also going to add a blue gel to our background light to give it a moonlight look. It's yet another look we have created by just making a few adjustments. RGB lights can produce the colors red, green, and blue. And when these colors are mixed, they can produce all kinds of different colors. This gives filmmakers and photographers a lot of creative choices that they used to only get by placing colored gels in front of lights. Imagine how many colored gels you would need to match the colors that an RGB light can produce by simply adjusting a dial or controlling an app. We will show you some lighting setups using RGB lights. But first, let me show you the specific RGB lights that we will be using. This is a Came TV Slim Tube RGB LED light. I like this light because it can be dimmed. It has removable barn doors to control light spill. It can run off of inexpensive Sony NPF type batteries, and of course it can create a lot of different colors. Color temperatures ranging from 2000 to 9999 degrees Kelvin. I also love its effects. It has 36 scenes. Some of my favorites are lightning, TV,
let both sides explore what problems unite us, instead of belaboring those problems which divide us.
bonfire, and police. So you can see right away how these effects could help you light a scene. I will also be using this Yongnuo YN360 RGB LED light. It also runs on Sony NPF batteries. This type of light is often referred to as a light bar. Lighting setup number 1, using RGB lights as rim lights. I've set up a black backdrop so you can see what the lights do to our subject without a lot going on in the background of the shot. I will place the light bar on the right side of our subject and set it to blue. Here's what that looks like. Notice how the light rims the side of our subject's face. On the left side of our subject, I will place the tube and set it to red. Remember, these are the colors that I've chosen. You could of course pick other colors. Here's what both of the lights on looks like on our subject. It's pretty dramatic. If we want to brighten the face a little bit, we can place a third LED light right next to or above the camera. I'll put a collapsible softbox on this light to diffuse it. This is a daylight balance light, so our camera's white balance is set to 5600 degrees Kelvin, daylight. Adjust the brightness to your liking. This is what it looks like with just a little light from this third light. And this is what it looks like with the light being brighter. Notice how we can see a nice catch light in the subject's eyes. Setup 2, using RGB lights as back and background lights. In this next setup, we will place our RGB tube light in the background of our shot to light up the wall. Let's make it blue. I'll place it just out of frame using a boom arm. Here's what that looks like. Next, we will place our RGB bar light on the right side of our subject to light up the side of his head and shoulder. I'll set it to blue as well to make it look like the light from the background is also lighting the back side of our subject. Finally, I'll place the LED light with the softbox on it to the side of the camera, further from the camera than our last setup. This is another solid yet simple light setup in my opinion. The blue background really helps pop the subject away from the background. Here's another quick version of this setup using our two RGB lights set to red. This time, we placed our background RGB light in the shot. If this was a music video, we could place several tubes in the background, perhaps pulsing to the beat of the music. Here's what that shot looks like with all 3 lights on. It's pretty dramatic. Setup 3, using RGB lights for a natural look. One thing to keep in mind is that RGB lights can also create natural looking light. They are not just for colors. We'll place our light bar above our subject's head and use it as a backlight. We set the light to daylight balanced. With our camera's white balance also set to daylight, the light from this light looks natural, no color tint. To soften it, I'll clip a piece of diffusion gel around it. It puts light on our subject's head and shoulders. It also lights up the background of our shot a little bit. We'll also set the tube light to 5600 degrees Kelvin. This makes it daylight balanced. We'll place it near our camera and use it as a key light. To soften it, we'll place a circular, collapsible diffuser in front of it. This creates a nice natural looking shot in my opinion. Next, we'll add an LED light in the hallway just to light up the doorway in our shot a little bit. Finally, we will aim another LED light up at the ceiling and adjust it so that it brings up the ambient light levels in the entire room. This also helps fill in the shadow side of our subject's face, just a little bit. Setup 4, Horror Silhouette. Another quick setup you can try is just using the RGB lights set to red and have them light up the background wall of your shot. Leave your subject in the foreground unlit. This creates a horror-style silhouette look that's quite effective in my opinion. Setup 5, Gritty Bathroom Look. Here's another simple setup. Place the tube light on a light stand and set it to green. Have it light up the wall in the shot. Put the RGB bar on a boom arm and place it over the subject's head. Also set it to green. Clip a diffusion gel around it to soften the light a little bit. You can also add a piece of black wrap foil on the end of it to reduce some of the light spill. The result is a very green and dramatic gritty look. The green mimics ugly fluorescent light. Of course, a more beat-up bathroom would help sell this look. If you don't want to go that extreme, you could warm up the overhead light and get a result that looks like this. Well, those are some ways to use RGB lights. Of course, with all of the colors that they offer, the possibilities are endless. I hope I inspired you. Now let me show you how to build a book light to create soft light when shooting a person. Our first book light will be created using Pro Gear. It consists of a silver reflector, a light stand with a clamp to hold the silver reflector, a piece of diffusion material called silk, a light stand with a boom arm to hold the silk, a Godox VL150 light as our light source, and a light stand to hold our light. It's called a book light because it looks like an open book when you look at the setup in a diagram. The back of the book is our reflector, attached to a stand. The front of the book is our diffusion, the piece of silk hanging from the boom arm. The Godox light is aimed at the silver reflector. The light bounces off of the silver reflector, and then the bounce light travels through the silk and onto our subject, creating a big soft light. First, here's the shot with only the practical light on, the consumer lamp on the table in the background of the shot. Now let's turn on our book light. As you can see, the book light creates a big soft light source on our subject. The light wraps around the subject's face. Shadows are very soft. The book light is our key light in this scenario. If you want a flatter look, less contrast, you can put a white bounce card next to the subject across from our book light, and it will act as a fill light on the darker side of our subject's face. making illumination on the face a little more even. If we want the darker side of our subject's face to be darker, a little more dramatic, we can use a black furniture blanket instead of the white pounce card. This is called negative fill. It absorbs light and creates contrast. To make the background of the shot more interesting, I placed a second Godox VL150 light on a light stand off camera in the back of our shot. It shoots light through the open doorway in our background. To break the light up a little with shadow, I placed strips of tape across a gel holder. This gives a light through blinds look. Now let's look at creating a low-budget do-it-yourself book light. In this scenario, I've replaced the silver reflector with a simple white bed sheet. Instead of the Godox VL150 light, I'm using 2 Home Depot work lights with 2 consumer Cree daylight LED bulbs in them. Instead of the silk diffuser, I'm using a shower curtain. Instead of using the second VL150 to light up the background, I'm using another work light. And again, I'm shooting it through the strips of tape. For fill light, I'll use the same white foam board. I'm also using the same stands, but you could buy cheap stands and a bunch of clamps to keep the cost of those items low. In addition, I placed another work light off camera, slightly behind and above where our subject will sit. This will be a backlight. It's aimed at the subject's head and shoulders. My wife will sit in as our subject this time. I really like the look of this shot. Can you tell that we used cheap lights to light it? The backlight on her dark hair looks nice, easier to light than my bald head. I prefer the more expensive gear for 4 main reasons. 1. The quality of light from the VL150 is very good. No green or magenta tint that you sometimes get with cheaper lights. 2. The Godox VL150 lights are very bright. Sometimes you will need more powerful lights to pull off good lighting. Sometimes you won't, it depends on the situation. 3. The Pro lights are dimmable. You can dim them to the exact amount of light you need and their color temperature doesn't change. They also don't flicker. And 4. The Godox lights can be battery powered. Nice to not have to always plug them into a power outlet. But obviously work within your budget. Even without having a lot of expensive gear, you can often get very good results by using techniques like the book light. In this tutorial, I will show you how to use Cove Lighting to create a cinematic looking image. First, let's take a look at our shot without any added lighting. As you can see, the practical light, the lamp on the table lighting our subject on its own, isn't very cinematic. We can do better. Now let's build our curved wall to bounce our lights off of, known as Cove Lighting. I've set up 4 light stands and will use 4 clamps to attach a long piece of unbleached muslin across them. Basically, we are creating a curved wall of muslin around part of our subject and then aiming multiple lights at it. These multiple lights become one light source. The goal is to have this bounced light wrap around our subject, but still make it look like the light is coming from the lamp on the table. The curved wall of muslin begins on the side of the lamp and ends next to the side of the camera. We will illuminate the cove with 3 inexpensive LED lights. I just placed them on the floor aimed up at the muslin. All 3 are daylight balanced, so that's the white balance setting we chose for our camera, the Blackmagic Pocket 6K. I'll close the drapes in the room to keep outside light from spilling into our shot. We want to control the light. I also replaced the bulb in the practical lamp with a daylight balanced bulb to match the other lights we'll be using. To make the background of our shot look more interesting, I've placed an RGB LED light on the stairs with only the blue LED bulbs on. This gives us a moonlight type of look. I placed a tree branch in front of this light to add some shadows to the back wall. I will also add some Christmas decorations to the background of the shot. They add a little more interest. Of course, you'll use lighting sources that are appropriate to your scene. In addition, I'll add an LED light aimed at the wall behind the Christmas tree. I'll double blue gel it to help it better match the other LED background light. Now let's turn on our lights aimed at the cove, starting with the one closest to the lamp in our shot. Note the first light we will turn on will be the brightest. As you can see, we start to get more light on our subject's face. Let's turn on the light illuminating the middle of the wall of muslin. It's dimmed a little so that it's not as bright as the previous light that we just turned on. You can see that the light is wrapping around our subject's face with warm, soft light thanks to the unbleached muslin's color. Let's turn on our third LED light. This one is the dimmest of the three. This helps sell that the light coming from the lamp in our shot is getting darker as it wraps around to the front of the face. It's a gradual wrap. Soft light created by bouncing sometimes spills all over our set and makes our lighting less dramatic. Sometimes that's okay, sometimes that's not. To control light spill, I'll place a black furniture blanket on a stand next to our subject on the opposite side of the camera. This acts as a negative fill and gives us deeper shadows on the subject's face. I'll also use a black flag on a light stand to block light from spilling on the ceiling. A black flag is another way to control undesired spill light. Now we have more contrast in our scene. This is our final shot. We're going to take a look at using a light modifier called the Cylinder Omni Softbox. It's also known as a space light, and I'll show you examples of how to use it. Let's get started with assembly. Angler makes the Cylinder Omni Softbox that I'm using in this video. It collapses nicely into this small bag. I'll be attaching it to my Godox VL150 LED cob light on a counterweighted boom arm connected to a light stand. First, remove the reflector from the Bowens mount on the light. Click the lock and turn to release. Next, open the zipper at the bottom of the cylinder. Then insert the reflector through the opening. Then push it through the top of the cylinder like this. Then tighten the drawstring. Finally, attach the reflector to the light. Just insert it and twist. It will lock in place. The reflector holds the cylinder by hanging from it. You can zip up the bottom of the cylinder now. There are other cylinder softbox options available for lights that don't have a Bowens mount. I'll leave a list of links to them in the description below this video in case you want to check them out. I also purchased 2 optional skirts that attach to the cylinder. Using just one skirt will go around half of the cylinder. You simply use included clips to attach the skirt to the cylinder. The skirt is good for controlling light spill if you want your light to be more directional. And because the inside of the skirt is silver, it intensifies the light output, which is also great. If you use 2 skirts, you can completely block light coming out of the sides of the cylinder. Now, using 2 skirts, light only comes from the bottom of the cylinder, which can sometimes be handy. I'll demonstrate that later. Now that I've shown you how to set up this light modifier, let me show you some ways to use it. Example 1. Bringing up ambient light levels in a room with the cylinder. First, let's take a look at our subject sitting in the chair with no lighting. We can obviously do better than this. The lamp on the table is not enough. I placed a Godox VL150 LED light near the camera and turned it on. This will be our key light. The shot looks better, but the lighting is a little hard. Notice the hard shadows on our subject's face. Also notice the small catch light in the subject's eyes. A catch light, by the way, is simply the highlight of a light source reflected off of the surface of the eye. There's nothing wrong with using hard lighting, of course, but let's try to make the light softer and the catch light in the eyes bigger. To do this, we must make the light source bigger. So I'll place a round collapsible diffuser in front of it. Now the light source is much bigger. You'll notice that the shadows are much softer and the catch lights are much bigger. This is often a more flattering look. Of course, the choice is yours. If we want a less contrasty shot, we can add a fill light to fill in the shadow side of the subject's face. On the opposite side of where our key light is, next to our subject, I will place a white card clipped on a stand. This fill light reduces contrast on our subject's face. Next, we will place our cylinder softbox in the middle of the room behind our subject out of camera frame. If I turn on the light, you can see that we can bring up the ambient light all over the room because of the 360-degree beam spread from the cylinder. You can see why these are often referred to as space lights. They fill the space with soft light. We can add more contrast to the shot by dimming it. This makes it more dramatic. The choice is up to you. The cylinder also created a nice backlight on our subject. Example 2. Using the cylinder as a key light. We are no longer using the cylinder to light our background, so instead, we will use a VL150 LED light on a stand aimed at the background of the shot. To add some shadows, we will place a tree branch in front of it. Our key light near the camera is now the cylinder. To control light spill, I added one skirt which wraps around half of the cylinder. The light from the cylinder is very soft and flattering and creates nice catch light in our subject's eyes. To soften the shadows on the unlit side of our subject's face, I'll add a white card clamped on a stand. This acts as fill light again. You don't have to use fill light if you don't want to, it's a creative choice. Example 3. Using the cylinder as an overhead light. For this next example, we hung our cylinder on the boom and placed it directly above our subject. To control light spill, we added both skirts around the cylinder. Now, the only light coming from it comes from the bottom. This is not a flattering look on our subject, but it's very dramatic, like an interrogation scene. You can't see the subject's eyes. It's mysterious. If we want flattering overhead light, move the light toward the camera and away from the subject, so that the subject's eyes will be lit. This looks pretty good. If we want to reduce the shadow under the subject's chin, you can place the white bounce card aimed up at the subject. Place it just out of frame. It's just another look you can create using a cylinder light modifier. We'll explain what a practical light is and which bulbs work best in them when mixing these consumer lights with professional film and video lights. First, let's get a few definitions out of the way. As we mentioned earlier, a practical light is an actual working light that appears in a scene. This could be a lamp, for example. A practical light helps tell the audience where a light source is coming from and adds realism to the shot. I consider a professional video light to be a light that was designed for film and video production. These lights usually have very good color rendition and do not cause annoying flicker. In addition, these lights are often dimmable. These professional production lights are not visible in a scene. They are kept off camera, but are extremely important for getting proper camera exposure and creating the right mood for a scene or a shot. So are the bulbs that are in a practical light important? The answer is yes, because a cheap bulb may flicker or cast some unnatural looking light in your shot. light that is too blue, too orange, too green, or too magenta, for example. These consumer light bulbs may also be too dim or too bright in a scene. That's why I always carry around a couple of dimmers and multiple good practical light bulbs in my light kit that I can depend on if the on-set practical light has an ugly looking bulb in it. Let me show you what my bulbs look like on camera right next to light coming from a professional lighting fixture. For this demonstration, the pro light we'll be using is the Godox VL150. It's a LED light that is daylight balanced 5600K. As a reminder, K stands for Kelvin. Kelvin is a way to measure the color temperature of a light. Different light sources have different color temperatures. This chart shows that a pro daylight bulb is around 5600 degrees Kelvin, and a pro tungsten bulb is around 3200 degrees Kelvin. Professional lights usually produce one of these color temperatures or can be switched to either one of these color temperatures. The switchable ones can usually be adjusted to a color temperature in between 3200 and 5600K as well, which can often be very helpful. Basically, low Kelvin numbers are warmer looking light sources, like a candle flame that produces a color temperature of 1800 degrees Kelvin. A higher number Kelvin light source produces cooler light. Clear blue sky has a color temperature of 10,000 degrees Kelvin. There are 3 practical bulbs in my kit that I will show you. 1. A Cree Daylight 5000K LED bulb. It has a CRI of 90+. If you don't know, the Color Rendering Index, CRI, is a scale from 0 to 100% indicating how accurate a given light source is at rendering color. The higher the CRI number, the better. 90 CRI for an affordable consumer bulb like this one from Cree is pretty good. Just for reference, our professional Godox light has a CRI of 96. I'll leave my full review of this light in the description below this video if you want to learn more about it. Let's move on to our second practical light bulb that we will show you. A TP-Link Smart Wi-Fi LED bulb. Its color temperature can be adjusted from 2700K all the way up to 6500K. This bulb is also dimmable and can be controlled by an app on your smartphone called Casa. We'll also look at a generic incandescent 60-watt A19 light bulb. It has a color temperature around 3000 Kelvin. It's dimmable, but the color temperature gets warmer as it is dimmed. We'll also be using 2 plug-in lamp dimmers to control the brightness of these bulbs. One dimmer is for LED lights, the other is for incandescent lights. Before conducting the test of these practical bulbs, we white balance the camera to the color temperature of the Godox daylight balanced light. White balancing your camera makes your colors look more natural. White becomes white. If you are using multiple lights with different color temperatures, you usually want to white balance with one light type. Just be aware that light coming from the other lights may produce warmer or cooler colors in your scene. This may be desired and add interest to your shot. If it's not, make sure that you are using lights and bulbs that have the same color temperature, or as close as possible. Enough about Kelvin color temperature. Let me show you what my bulbs look like on camera right next to light coming from a professional lighting fixture. The left side of our shot has a Cree bulb and a practical lamp. The right side of our shot is lit with the Godox VL150. As you can see, the light from the Cree LED bulb looks pretty good next to the light from the Godox professional light. They mix well together. Let's dim the Cree bulb using our LED dimmer and see if it still looks good. It does. Dimming this bulb does not cause any noticeable issues, at least to my eye. Next, let's take a look at the TP-Link Smart LED bulb. Using the Casa app, I adjusted its color temperature to match the Godox light. It looks pretty good in my opinion. If you want to cool down or warm up the TP-Link bulb, you can easily do it with the app. This light looks pretty good when it's dimmed as well. Dimming this bulb does not cause any noticeable issues, at least to my eye. Now let's take a look at the incandescent bulb. It's clearly a lot warmer than the daylight balanced Godox light, but sometimes you may want to achieve that look. If not, use one of the other daylight bulbs. As we dim this bulb with our non-LED dimmer, it becomes even warmer. Still, it does not flicker. Using this light depends on if you want that warm-cold mix of light look. Sometimes you will and sometimes you won't. I'll leave links to all these bulbs in the description below this video. Note, if your professional video light is tungsten balanced 3200 Kelvin, you could purchase versions of some of these bulbs that match that color temperature, or at least come closer to it. I'll leave links to those bulbs as well. I hope you learned something from this video. Remember, practice makes perfect. I'll leave links in the description below this video if you want to check out the gear that I used. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.